Hi, welcome back. This is Dr. Burton. We continue to study Dr. Gangadean's Philosophical Foundation, a critical analysis of basic beliefs. We're still on chapter 1, which is clarity, philosophy, and reason. And we are now going to go over the reason section. Again, this is a groundbreaking piece of work that Dr. Gangadean contributed to the field of philosophy. He spent painstaking time to define what reason is in itself, how we use it, and how it's an aspect of human nature. I have not found this out there anywhere else. If you have found something like this or better than this, please show me. I think this is the clearest, most full definition of reason, and let's go through it together. What is reason? Reason is central to philosophy and to human existence. Yet there are disputes about the role of reason because the nature of reason in its most basic sense has not been kept in focus and made the basis of all else that is said about reason. So there's a lot of talk about reason and a lot of misunderstanding about what reason is. A lot of people use that word, but what do they mean by reason? There are disputes about the relation of faith and reason. I'm sure you've heard of those. Reason and Enlightenment rationalism. Rationalism and scientific empiricism, and reason and immediate knowledge by intuition. So here are some contrasts where there are disputes about reason. To avoid these and like disputes, it is necessary to make clear what reason is in itself, what reason is in its use, and what reason is in us. If there is agreement on what is more basic, then there can and will be agreement on what is less basic. I think this might be the most important part of, philosophy and the method of philosophy, defining reason. What is reason in itself? First, reason in itself is the laws of thought, which are the law of identity, A is A, the law of non-contradiction, not both A and non-A at the same time and in the same respect, and the law of excluded middle, either A or non-A. If there are other laws of thought, they are based on these laws as basic. Their status as laws make thought possible as the laws of life make life possible. If a law of life, for example breathing, is violated, life ceases. So, if a law of thought is violated, thought ceases. What is contrary to a law of thought, when seen as such, cannot be thought. So if something goes against reason, it can't be thought. The law of identity identifies and distinguishes A and non-A at the same time. A is A. A is not non-A, which is to say, a thing is what it is. Rock is rock, fish is fish, finite is finite, finite is not infinite. Being is being, being is not non-being. To conceive of A is to conceive of non-A and to distinguish the two. To say A is different from and simultaneously the same as non-A is to lose the meaning of same and different. And as a consequence, if one is being consistent, to lose all meaning. So if we say rock is non-rock, we're not saying anything meaningful. Certain claims upon analysis will be seen to be saying A is non-A. The eternal is non-eternal, that is, temporal. Being is non-being. So he's giving you a heads up about where he's going. He's going to show you where these contradictions happen in basic beliefs in worldviews. Internal coherence of a view or mutual contradiction between two views is sometimes accommodated by pronouncing that reason is limited. This point will be revisited many times as we work through recurrent moves and maneuvers which attempt to show the limits of reason. So sometimes people blame reason rather than dig deeper and use reason more critically. These laws of thought, beginning with the law of identity, assume the reality of essences, which are permanent qualities by which a thing can be identified, and distinguished from all else. So we're going to have to talk about essences as we go along. They assume the notion of being and properties of being, of permanence of some sort, and of change and causes of change. So these are basic concepts that are transcendentals that allow thought to be possible. The consequence of consistently denying the reality of essences, permanence, change, and causality is to make meaningful thought impossible and therefore inherently self-defeating. Each law of thought is necessarily implicated in the other. So the law of identity, the law of excluded middle, the law of non-contradiction, they're all implied in the others. Attempts to qualify any law so as to disqualify it will be examined in the course of showing that some things are clear to reason. Even when attempts are made to limit reason, reason is still commonly understood to be these laws of thought: identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle. Disagreements or conflicts between thoughts cannot be understood apart from the laws of thought. So these laws of thought are most basic. So the laws of thought, so we talked about reason meaning truth. Now we have reason, the laws of thought are most basic in reason. Why? Because we also have reason in its use. Reason in its use assumes the laws of thought. So let's look at that. Conflicts regarding reason are more related to the use of reason rather than to reason in itself, the laws of thought. Several uses of reason should be distinguished. Reason in its use is first formative, then critical, then interpretive, and lastly constructive. So Dr. Gangadean named what we do with reason. The first use of reason is formative. So this is the formative use of reason. Write it down, take notes. It is used to form concepts, judgments, and arguments, which are the forms of all thought. So if we're thinking, we're using concepts, judgments, or arguments. After examining the sources of skepticism, that's coming up, in order to show how knowledge is possible by reason and argument, concepts, judgments, and arguments will each be explained and analyzed. So you get a mini logic lesson in this book. What needs to be noted here is that even when arguments are not being given, in every thought, reason is being used to form concepts and judgments. And if concepts are not well formed, that is, if A is not adequately distinguished from non-A, the meaning of A is obscured or is lacking. So we may not define a concept well. If meaning at the level of concept is lacking, meaning at the level of judgments will also be lacking. Why? Meaning, judgment, argument. No meaning here, there won't be meaning here or here. Neither speaker nor hearer will understand the meaning of what is being asserted, and the assertion of the judgment is made void. So meaning is more basic than truth. Meaning is connected to concepts. We want to define our terms well. We want to have a well-formed concept. A and non-A. Rock and non-rock. Human and non-human. The second use of reason is the critical use of reason as the test for meaning. Now, we talked about this a little bit in the definition of philosophy. Meaning is more basic than truth. One has to understand the meaning of a statement before judging its truth. Remember, Blick's our Gru, God is love. Reason is used to understand meaning. What is contrary to a law of thought cannot be thought. Blick's are non-Blick's, remember? It lacks meaning and cannot be understood. A meaningless statement cannot be true. To meaningfully assert any statement requires the use of reason to grasp its meaning, and therefore requires the critical use of reason. Assertions without meaning are unintelligible, and meaning without reason is not possible. You're not going to get meaning through your intuition or your feelings or any other way, through your senses. No assertion without the critical use of reason is meaningful to the speaker or hearer. Remember, we have to understand what it means, and that takes the critical use of reason. Many assertions, pronouncements, declarations, and slogans made, often with passionate intensity, turn out, upon little analysis, a little analysis to lack meaning. So we say a lot of things, we read a lot of things, we hear a lot of things. They may be said passionately, but most of the times they don't mean anything. The critical use of reason distinguishes sense from apparent sense, and so keeps us from believing nonsense. Isn't that nice? What makes sense and what doesn't make sense. It keeps us from believing nonsense. A third use of reason is the interpretive use of reason. Reason is used to interpret our experience in light of our basic beliefs. No experience is meaningful without interpretation. We experience a lot of things. Everything's happening to us all the time, right? Stuff's happening right now. I hear sounds. I hear sound waves, right? I hear a sound. What is it? I have to interpret that sound. Common sense and science often fail to distinguish between appearances in the mind and reality outside the mind, between pure data and interpretation of data. We're going to talk a lot more about this. What's the difference between data and interpretation of data? Mystical or intuitive experience is neither self-certifying nor meaningful without interpretation. A lot of people claim to have had experiences, but what does the experience mean? Narratives of literature, history, and scripture likewise are interpreted in light of basic belief, though literalists may deny that any interpretation is taking place. So when we read something, we have to make sense of it. We have to give meaning. We have to interpret it. And some people may say, well, the word means what it means. No, we're interpreting even the concepts, right? We have to know what a word means. So there's never not interpretation. Sometimes an entire belief system, for example, theism, may be deconstructed or reinterpreted in light of another belief system, naturalism, or by a hermeneutic of suspicion in postmodernism, as if naturalism were metaphysically neutral. So I think there's a lot of talk right now about deconstructing your faith. What does that even mean, deconstruction? It means critical analysis, usually tearing down things that are false or showing assumptions, but do we attempt to rebuild once we've deconstructed? And notice naturalism and postmodernism, I'm going to say, they're not metaphysically neutral. They have metaphysical assumptions, even if they claim we don't do metaphysics anymore. Yes, they do. They interpret things according to basic beliefs. The basic beliefs may just be there's nothing supernatural, there's only nature. Where interpretation is recognized, the temptation is to despair and saying, all is interpretation. That does happen in postmodernism. Or, as often one hears, it's all a matter of interpretation. But since interpretation is in light of one's basic belief, reason can be used critically to test basic beliefs for meaning. So we don't have to get stuck in this position, everything is interpretation and they're equal interpretations. No, some interpretations are better than others because they make more sense, because the worldview in which they're interpreted makes more sense, because it's grounded foundationally in reason. Okay? Fourth and last, reason is used to construct a coherent world and life view. And then it says, see philosophy as a system. We did just talk about this. We have a foundation. We construct a whole world and life view. Reason is that tool of construction. In man's basic need for meaning, every dimension of life gets connected. This is what understanding is about, connecting the dots. In each worldview, some things must be said and some things cannot be said, given the requirements of reason for system and coherence. For example, if you're an atheist, you can't say, God answered my prayers. That just can't be said because you don't believe in God and you don't believe God answers prayers. The constructive use of reason is not the critical use of reason, but its claims are often passed off as the deliverances of reason. So we're going to see that the rationalists do this. They claim that that reason leads to this conclusion and this view of life, and when we critically analyze it, reason did not lead there. The constructive use of reason did, but the foundation was assumed, not proven. We built on it, and the whole system was not matching reality. This claim of the constructive use of reason, made in the name of reason, is what is often called rationalism. In rejecting the pretensions made in the name of reason, many uncritically denounce reason generally and indiscriminately, both in itself and in its other uses. I've seen people tear down philosophy and say philosophy is what led to this current crisis we're having in the culture right now, because that's what reason does. And they say, no, that's what reason misused does. That's what the constructive use of reason without the critical use of reason does. The limits of reason within a given system are not to be identified with the limits of reason per se. Reason in itself must be distinguished from reason in its several uses and from reason in us. So let's go over the several uses again. Reason is formative, it's critical, it's interpretive, and it's constructive. And that's different than reason in us, which is what we're going to talk about now. So how is reason an aspect of our being as humans? Reason in us is natural, ontological, transcendental, and fundamental. All very big words, right? The good thing about this book is it has a glossary, so you could look things up. Reason as the laws of thought in us is natural, not conventional. So here's where he's going to talk about natural. It is universal, the same in all who think. There is not a Greek and non-Greek rationality. There is not a male and female rationality. There is not an old and young or a rich and poor rationality, although these have become lines of division among human beings. Reason as the laws of thought in us is the common ground for all who think. It is the common ground between theists and non-theists, even when different claims are being made about reason based on different views of reality and human nature. So we've talked about common ground in different senses. Now we've talked about the principle of clarity and common ground. Now we're talking about reason as part of common ground. Also integrity. You have to have integrity in order to have common ground. And the rational presuppositional method of dealing with what is more basic first. So common ground is necessary for all who think. It is the common ground between theists and non-theists. It is the common ground between theists and non-theists, reason is, even when different claims are being made about reason based on different views of reality and human nature. To make any claim using concepts, judgments, and arguments is to use reason. No one professes to make a claim which is both true and non-true at the same time and in the same respect. No one says, listen to this statement I'm about to make because it's false. Right? One cannot deny that reason is the common ground and yet hold that contradictory statements cannot both be true. That would be to affirm the law of non-contradiction, a law of reason, as common ground, while denying reason as the common ground. So we can't affirm contradictions. Second, reason is ontological. It applies to being as well as to thought. There are no square circles. This is known by reason alone. So reason applies to thinking, concepts, judgments, and arguments, but it applies to being as well. And there are some beings that cannot be. They're not beings, non-beings. A square circle is a non-being. Why? Because it's a contradiction. What is logically impossible is ontologically impossible. That means it can't be. We can't think it and it can't be. There is no being from non-being. You can't get being from non-being. Being has properties. It exists. It has the power to be. Non-being has no properties, does not exist, and it has no power to be. There is no uncaused event. And then he says, see chapter 4. He's going to talk about uncaused events. Reason applies to all being, to the highest being, to God's being. God is not both A and non-A. God is not both eternal and non-eternal at the same time and in the same respect. As an aspect of God's being, Reason is eternal, not created. So that's deep, right? Think about that. Reason applies to the being of God. So reason's not created. The laws of nature and theism are created. So the laws of nature are created. Reason is eternal, not created. The laws of nature and theism are created. The laws of reason are not created, but they are that by which creation comes to be. That's deep. Think about it. Miracles may be acts of God which stand above, apart from, or against the laws of nature, since these are created laws. But miracles cannot be against reason. So there are claims to miracles that aren't actually miracles because they violate the laws of thought. For example, if water is changed into wine, it is not both water and not water, that is to say wine, at the same time. Claims made by science or by religion or by philosophy which go against reason are unwarranted and cannot stand. Okay, I'll let you think about that. It's deep stuff. Go back, read this chapter, think about it. Third, reason is transcendental. Remember, this is reason in us. It is authoritative. It's the highest authority. Reason is the highest authority. It stands above all thinking and makes thinking possible. So the laws are authoritative. It cannot be questioned, for it makes questioning possible. Reason is self-attesting. It testifies to itself and cannot be testified to by another. It is the highest authority in the realm of human knowledge. The deliverances of prophets, poets, philosophers, and physicists must be in accord with reason. Isn't that a lovely sentence? The deliverances of prophets, poets, philosophers, and physicists must be in accord with reason. Prophets must speak in the name of God, consistent with what is clear about God from creation. The poet's intuition is not infallible in a morally fallible world. So intuition doesn't always work in a fallen world. We'll talk more about that. Philosophers cannot deny reason and make any affirmation about being, and they try to do that. So too, physicists cannot deny reason in affirming uncaused events in the origin of the universe or in quantum physics. Ooh, getting close to home now. Fourth, reason is fundamental. It is fundamental to other aspects of human personality, such as feelings and will. Belief direct desires, and together they both move the will. We desire what we believe is the good and act to achieve what we desire. The apparent conflict between belief and desire and belief in the will are to be explained by inconsistencies and insufficiencies in understanding, lacks which are culpable or inexcusable in light of clarity. There's a lot we can talk about there. I'm not going to right now. Reason is fundamental also in that its use is the source of man's greatest happiness, and its disuse is the source of man's deepest misery. Ooh, is that just philosophical flourish, or is it true? By reason, we understand the meaning of things. Meaning absorbs and satisfies our attention. Is that true? We are willing to die to preserve what gives life meaning. The lack of meaning leaves us empty and bored. We seek to escape the emptiness and boredom through excess, which never satisfies, or through death by suicide. Is that true? Do humans need meaning? Are they willing to die for that which gives meaning? And are they willing to commit suicide when life doesn't give meaning? Reason, as the source of meaning, is what is most basic. There will be need to return often to what is briefly sketched here. Disputes are to be resolved by agreeing on what is more basic, and reason is most basic. Reason does not persuade and should not be expected to persuade. We talked about this. Reason clarifies and makes us more aware. In clarifying, it compels greater consistency. It moves us one way or the other. It is the light which shines in the darkness and which cannot be withstood by the darkness. There is a choice in the end. The choice is between reason and no reason, between meaning and no meaning, between light and darkness, between life and death. You decide. Okay, so we just went over reason in us. It is natural, ontological, transcendental, and fundamental. And we just completed chapter 1, clarity, philosophy, and reason. Next, we will talk about sources of skepticism and fideism. Boy, is that going to be interesting. Okay, thank you for joining me, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Share these videos with your friends, have a conversation, and let's get philosophy back to its importance and deal with foundational issues. Think critically, my friends.